Angry widower exposed. Discover the surprising truth when his twins' lives are amazingly saved. James McCarthy's heart was a storm, a tumult of fury against a merciless universe. Alone in his classroom, he watched the flickering glow of the projector cast a thin veil on the students who had unknowingly become the backdrop of his agony. The laughter and chatter that once energized him now felt amplified, suffocating, reminding him of the empty space beside him where his wife used to sit, guiding their family with love and laughter. Each day was a struggle to teach when his own thoughts were a battle, a fight he feared he was losing. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. The vibrancy of Maplewood dimmed with each passing week, and as he moved through the hallways, friendly faces morphed into wary glances. It was as if the grief that consumed him cast a shadow over his daughters, Emma and Lily, sharp reminders that they were navigating this cruel world without their mother. He felt anger boil over when they laughed, a reminder of what was taken from him, of what he couldn't offer them anymore. How could he shield them from the bitterness of life? How could he be anything but angry at himself for not being enough? Then came the life-altering news. Emma and Lily, both brimming with energy, began coughing, and within days a grim diagnosis echoed in the sterile walls of the hospital, a rare respiratory illness. It was a death knell wrapped in a gasp, and as he stood there, clutching their small hands, so fragile, so innocent, his world shattered further. He didn't just grapple with emotions, he wrestled with his very identity. The mounting bills loomed over him like an unfinished lesson plan, suffocating. How could he ask for help when shame wrapped around him like a noose? In a sea of cluttered reminders of better days, he found an old family scrapbook, its pages crinkled with time. Within it lay the story of relatives who owned a seemingly forgotten property just outside town. Hope flickered. Could that crumbling estate harbor safety? But navigating through the red tape was a labyrinth, and every call to distant relatives opened wounds of isolation. He could feel Maplewood's judgment weighing on him. Once familiar faces turned their backs, awkward silences filling the air wherever he went. James's pride was an unlit candle against the storm, and he hesitated. Would reaching out be admitting defeat? Did he have a right to be angry at the world when he was lost in the wreckage of his own making? Questions plagued him as he paced his cluttered living room, heart racing. Just when he thought he might crumble, a glimmer of support emerged in the form of a retired librarian, Margaret. Her wisdom radiated like sunlight piercing through dark clouds, but doubt lingered. Could he embrace her offered hand without fear of being consumed by his bitterness? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. With Margaret's help, Hope started unearthing pieces of the hidden legacy. Yet, as James grew closer to untangling the estate's complexities, the town's authority figures became an obstacle, dismissing his efforts with cold indifference. In the throes of climactic frustration, he realized that his internal battle was now one of external confrontation. A flicker of purpose ignited within him as he confronted his insecurities. Would they see him as just a widower anchored by loss, or would they recognize the desperation of a father clinging to any chance to save his daughters? As he stood at the precipice, he was faced with the most profound realization yet. He had the power to demand change, even if it meant facing the very people he once trusted. In that moment, when the air felt heavy with potential, he questioned if love could overshadow the weight of his grief. Empowered by fear and necessity, James's journey was only just beginning, and darkness loomed. What would he find within himself and his community that could usher in the dawn of something new? James stood at the edge of a precipice, gripped by an unfamiliar sense of determination. The doubt that once held him captive began to flicker like a dying ember, sparking moments of clarity within a mind tangled in sorrow and despair. He could almost hear the quiet encouragement of his daughters as they fought their own battles, both physical and emotional. They were his motivation, yet he felt uncertain about his ability to nurture their flames while wrestling with his own grief. With Margaret's knowledge as his compass, he dove into the complexities of the estate. Each dusty document and faded photograph led him deeper into a history he had long neglected. The more he uncovered, the more clearly he could see the doors this legacy could open. Those doors were a lifeline for the girls, a stable home, a fresh start where laughter had the space to grow again. However, his newfound enthusiasm clashed with the indifference from the local authorities, as each rejection felt like a personal affront. He prepared for the inevitable meeting in town hall, echoing with memories of earlier days when his voice contributed to decisions shaping Maplewood. He dug out his suit, the fabric still holding a trace of his wife's scent, a reminder of the man he once was. The weight of expectation filled the air as he stood before a committee comprised of familiar faces now hardened by apathy. Nervousness gnawed at him, compounded by the belief he might be ridiculed or dismissed. Yet something shifted. Perhaps it was the memory of his daughter's laughter or Margaret's unwavering support that pushed him forward. As he began to speak, every word felt heavy with unspoken grief and unshed tears, but it was unmistakably laced with defiance. He recounted their plight, not just as a widower's plea, but as a father's desperate fight for adequate care for Emma and Lily. The committee shifted uneasily, cloaked in a power that had long overshadowed him. Would they even hear his struggle? Or would he remain just another man lost in grief, denied the right to reclaim his life and that of his daughters? Then the unexpected happened. A voice cut through the tension, Margaret's, steady and loud, advocating for him as if his battle were her own. "This is about more than property. It's about a family," she declared, exuding a confidence he longed to emulate. Her fierce support was a light in the dark, the kind he never knew he needed. He could see the committee's attention shift. A flicker of understanding sparked in their eyes. For the first time, he wasn't alone, and it transformed the fabric of his argument, weaving in threads of hope. As the meeting dissolved into discussions rife with bureaucratic jargon, James found himself struggling to maintain focus, his mind racing between possibilities. Would they find a way to move forward, to collaborate rather than dismiss? Or would they declare his aspirations futile? Returning home that night, a heavy silence enveloped him. He sat on the edge of the twins' beds, illuminated only by the gentle glow of a nightlight. Emma stirred, her tiny hand grasping his thumb as if to absorb his uncertainty. "Daddy, you okay?" she mumbled, her voice barely breaking the stillness of the room. His heart swelled with realization. It wasn't just about what he needed, it was about what they needed. They needed a father who could move past anger and find strength amid despair. A plan began to take shape, intertwining his desire to reclaim their life while also challenging deep-seated notions of masculinity and vulnerability. This would not be an easy road, but a fissure of hope had cracked through the darkness. What came next would test his resolve and his ability to protect his daughters from the bitter hand life had dealt. As dawn broke, it stirred something within him, a blend of fear and courage igniting the spirit of fight he once possessed. It was time to confront not only the committee, but also his own self-imposed limitations. The moment of truth was at hand, where every action would determine the fate of their fragile future. And with that thought, he questioned if he could stand tall against the decomposition of his grief, Or if the shadows would always loom large over them? Would love, in all its forms, armor him in the battle to come? As dawn broke, it stirred something within him, a blend of fear and courage igniting the spirit of fight he once possessed. It was time to confront not only the committee, but also his own self-imposed limitations. The moment of truth was at hand, where every action would determine the fate of their fragile future. And with that thought, he questioned if he could stand tall against the decomposition of his grief, or if the shadows would always loom large over them. Would love, in all its forms, armor him in the battle to come? James awoke the next morning, the sun spilling golden light into the room, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air. He stared at the ceiling, pondering the day ahead. The meeting loomed large in his mind, a daunting specter, promising confrontation with both the committee and his own personal demons. Fear tightened its grip around his chest, yet within that fear lay the pulse of determination, urging him to rise. As he moved through the morning routine, preparing breakfast, a sense of purpose began to crystallize in him. He flipped through the pages of Margaret's notes, her keen observations about the estate, the past inhabitants, the complexities of local regulations. Each line felt like a lifeline thrown to him, drawing him toward the understanding that everything he was fighting for was not just a matter of property, but of identity, of lineage, and of ensuring his daughter's futures. He could not allow himself to falter today. As he poured syrup over the pancakes, he felt the stirring of something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a drive. Emma and Lily's voices broke his reverie, their laughter intertwining as they found joy in the simplest of acts. Their innocence reminded him why he needed to push through the challenges ahead. The reversal of his circumstances was within reach, and the thought ignited a primal urge to protect, provide, and advocate for his family. Each bite of breakfast became a step toward a future he envisioned, one where his daughters thrived, far removed from the remnants of loss. He watched the girls chat animatedly over their steaming plates, realizing how imperative it was for him to embody the steadfast presence they needed. After breakfast, the customary calm of the early morning settled, but it felt different today. James channeled the energy he had felt in the town hall meeting, the sense that he was not alone, that there were allies, even within himself. He knew he had to rally them to his cause. Arriving at the town hall, a pang of anxiety washed over him, but he dug his hands into his pockets, feeling the reassuring texture of the estate papers within. These were not just documents, they were the blueprint of their future, a canvas upon which he could paint the life he wished to create for Emma and Lily. As he entered the chamber, his heart raced, yet he stood firm. The mundane chatter of the committee faded into the background as he focused on the power of his voice. It was time to face the coordinated apathy that had greeted him before. He could no longer see himself as a mere supplicant. "Thank you for your time," he began, his voice steady, reverberating against the polished wood of the chamber. He avoided the gaze of his detractors, fixating instead on a point beyond the table where his determination sharpened into clarity. "I want to talk about family, about legacy, and about the future of my children." As he elaborated on the impact the estate could have, not just for him, but as a foundation for the generations to come, the room filled with unexpected tension. The silence that followed his words was charged, as if the committee could feel the weight of his commitment. James was no longer an inconsequential figure, but a father transformed by grief. Yet deep inside, doubts clawed at him. Was he making a fool of himself? Would they even care about his story? He scanned the faces of the committee members, searching for any semblance of interest or empathy, but their expressions remained stoic. Then, just as he felt himself wavering, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was Margaret, her presence invigorating and valiant. Without needing to speak, her very stance radiated solidarity, and James felt the warmth of shared purpose wrap around him. As he continued, his words flowed more freely, inspired by her presence. He became immersed in narrative, his story interwoven with pleading for understanding. But while the meeting offered a glimmer of hope, a lingering dread gripped him. What if all this was in vain? After concluding his presentation, he thought about the outcome that loomed ahead. Would the committee respond favorably, or would this moment of bravery dissolve like water through his fingers? The thought nagged at him like an unresolved itch, but James resolved to confront the uncertainty ahead. The battle was far from over. His fight was as much internal as external, and amid newfound determination, he could no longer fear failure or ridicule. As he walked out, Margaret followed closely at his heels, the sense of camaraderie a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. He held on to the notion that the true fight was yet to come. The path he had chosen would lead to revelations about himself he had not anticipated, all while laying the groundwork for his daughter's uncharted future. And just as he thought courage might underpin his next steps, an unexpected voice pierced the air behind him. "James, wait, we need to talk." The gravity in their tone pulled at his gut, leaving him poised at the edge of possibility once more. James turned slowly, the familiar chill of anxiety creeping down his spine. The voice belonged to Carol, the head of the committee he had just pleaded his case to. Her expression was serious, inscrutable, as she motioned for him to step aside. He glanced at Margaret, seeking an anchor in the swirling uncertainty. Her brows furrowed in concern, but she nodded subtly, urging him on. With each step toward Carol, the breath hitched in his throat, and the weight of his vulnerability settled heavily on his shoulders. "James," Carol began, her tone lower as they moved into a quieter corner of the hall, "I need to discuss some important concerns that have come up regarding your proposal." The air between them felt charged, alive with unspoken implications. James forced himself to meet her gaze, listing the worries that gnawed at him. The project's timeline, the resources, the enormity of it all. Each question added layers to his anxiety, fear pooling in the pit of his stomach. "Before we get into that, can I ask you something?" Carol's eyes softened, a contrast to their usual cold precision. "Why did you choose to fight for this estate?" His response was instinctive, fueled by passion and desperation. "It's about my daughters. It's about giving them the life I promised their mother before everything changed." She studied him, her expression shifting from concern to something akin to respect. "You have a notable drive, James, but fighting for something isn't just about passion. It's about understanding how the system works. It's about strategy. Right now, your plan lacks a pivotal element." The implication both stung and provoked a flicker of clarity. "What do you mean?" "Your opponents have been in control for a long time. They won't just roll over because you have a heartwarming story. You'll need actionable steps to engage them, to win them over." A knot formed in his throat. Was she suggesting he might need to play their game? Deceive? It raised at his resolve, which had been built on authenticity and emotional honesty. "But that's manipulation," he retorted, frustration lacing his voice. "Or a necessary chess move," she countered, unwavering. "You're fighting for your daughters. A little pragmatism can go a long way." Her words hung heavy in the air, igniting a battle within him. He envisioned Emma and Lily's lives filled with worry and uncertainty if he failed. Could he reconcile his values with the harsh realities of their situation? As his thoughts wrestled, Carol continued, "Look, James, I can help you with this. I see potential in your approach, but it needs refining. You need allies. You need actionable items. Let's meet again, and I can assist you in converting your ideas into something tangible." Words danced at the edge of his mouth. Indecision swirled like smoke. He felt a pull toward her offer, yet inwardly resisted. If he altered his approach, would he compromise the sincerity of his advocacy? "Think it over," Carol said, sensing his hesitation. I'll give you some time, but don't underestimate how this committee operates. Be strategic or risk losing everything." As she walked away, the echoes of her warning thundered in his mind. He stood still, grappling with the duality of striving for authenticity while navigating a world that often thrives on contrivance. Could he accept that for once he might need to adapt the rules of engagement? Meanwhile, Margaret approached, curiosity in her eyes. What did she want? James hesitated, weighing the truth against the impression she had formed of him. Would she understand his internal struggle? If he ventured down this new path, would it mean betraying what he stood for?
"A lot more than I bargained for," he finally replied, the weight of uncertainty palpable. Margaret frowned, instinctually sensing the shift in his demeanor. "What are you going to do?" He looked toward the exit, where sunlight streamed through the doors, casting a long shadow behind him. The fight ahead demanded more than mere words. It required a balance of heart and strategy, a complex dance he hadn't anticipated. With a pulse of determination ignited by his daughter's future and Carol's insistence, he contemplated the possibility of transformation. What if he could navigate the system without losing his soul in the process? What untapped potential lay in reconciling his passion with calculated action? As he exited the building, James felt the stirrings of resolve intertwined with apprehension. He took a step forward, knowing that each choice would bring him closer to becoming the father he needed to be, even if it meant confronting his values head-on. "Daddy!" Emma's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him from his contemplation. "Yes, sweetheart? Can we go to the park after lunch?" James smiled, the warmth of her innocence rekindling his spirit. "Of course, let's make it a special day." But even as he agreed, a new challenge hung in the air, and he thought of Carol's proposition. Perhaps the true test would come not from his adversaries, but from within himself. And just as he found a moment of tranquility, the thought came crashing back. Can you truly match heart with strategy without sacrificing who you are? A chilling realization echoed within him. There was still much to confront, and every decision loomed like a question mark, waiting for answers he had yet to uncover. James strode toward his car, the sun glaring down as if challenging him to break free from the weight of his internal conflict. He could hear Emma's laughter fading in the background, a bittersweet reminder of why he fought so hard. Would he be able to foster a future for his daughters, or would he lose himself in a game that demanded cunning over compassion? Once inside the vehicle, he let out a shaky breath, grappling with Carol's words echoing in his mind like an incessant drum. The conceptual divide between authenticity and pragmatism felt like a chasm he had to cross. Somewhere in those moments of emotional turbulence lay the heart of his dilemma. Could he truly craft an approach that safeguarded his integrity while achieving his goals? A thought flickered to life. A meeting with Carol could unlock the pathway he needed. But how might embracing her notions of strategy reshape his understanding of advocacy? She was right about one thing. If he remained mired in purity, he risked complete obliteration in a harsh arena that rewarded insincerity. As he balanced the complexities of his predicament, James trapped his hands on the steering wheel, realizing he had been presented with an opportunity disguised as a quandary. He needed to evolve, not just within the disequilibrium of his professional landscape, but also as the father his daughters needed. By the time he gathered himself to leave the parking lot, a laser-like focus began sharpening his vision. He turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life as Katie's image surfaced in his thoughts, a reminder of the bind that had driven him forward. He replayed her laughter, envisioning how she would feel about his choices, reinforcing his resolve to provide a legacy their family could embrace. Thus, the wheels of his mind began to churn with newfound energy. Perhaps a viable starting point lay in identifying potential allies.
A strategy could be cultivating relationships with those already part of the committee, not merely to manipulate, but to connect authentically. If he could align his intentions with a beneficial network, the unfurling of his goals wouldn't demand sacrificing his moral core. James's thoughts expanded with each mile passed. Perhaps Carol's suggestion didn't equate to manipulation after all. What if it meant leveraging relationships to foster collaboration? Co-opting genuine engagement into his mission might offer the best of both worlds. Suddenly, he felt buoyed by a sense of possibility rather than fear. Once home, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting shadows in his living room, he embraced Emma and Lily, their warmth reaffirming his motivation. Time was fleeting, and each moment meant solidifying their future through the choices he was prepared to make. "Daddy, you promised a special day," Emma reminded him, pulling him back into their reality. "I know, sweetheart. Let's go to the park right after dinner. We'll have ice cream? Sounds good?" "Yay!" Lily squealed, her delight tangible in the air. James couldn't help but chuckle, despite the impending weight of decisions to come. Yet this, too, was pivotal. Building life experiences with his daughters was more than escapism. It was also a grounding reality, shaping their shared future amidst his challenges. As they played and shared laughter under the fading twilight, he couldn't shake the idea of reaching out to Carol, expressing his willingness to learn from her perspective. Could this intended alliance catalyze his advocacy mission? He needed to act quickly, lest he lose the opportunity knit between his vulnerability and the possibility of success. But deep within, a tide of anxiety persisted. Would his changes resonate with the authenticity he cherished? The thought grappled with him as he cleaned up the remnants of their little feast, his mind always wandering back to Carol's offer. As night cloaked the house, he reflected on the dichotomy of integrity and strategy laid before him. Tomorrow would require difficult conversations, arrangements that could redefine his approach. The stakes were high, and the pulse of uncertainty quickened. With each choice ahead, he wondered, could one thrive while moving deftly through a world knit with complexity? The commitment to put his daughters first wasn't just an assertion. It became the compass guiding him towards something greater. And just before surrendering to sleep, the question burned brighter in his mind. What if the greatest risk lay not in playing the game, but in choosing to raise the stakes? Would the ultimate battle shift from attempting to outmaneuver opponents to unearthing his hidden strength? The answers lingered just beyond reach, pulsing a desperate urgency that would shape his next move. The time to face the truth of what he could become was more imminent than ever. Morning arrived with a sense of urgency that clawed at James's insides. Deep breaths did little to quell the storm raging within as he prepared for the day's challenges. He glanced at the calendar on the wall. His meeting with Carol loomed ahead, and each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to Judgment Day. As he drove to the office, the sun blinked through the trees lining the streets, illuminating the path ahead. The hum of the engine competed with the thoughts spiraling through his mind. Could he convey his resolve without appearing desperate? Would Carol even take him seriously after all those years of clinging to his purest ideals? Parking in his usual spot, the weight of his decisions crested like a wave. While stepping into the building, he felt the swirling anticipation of change. Today could be the day he either solidified his plans or lost everything. Entering the conference room, he spotted Carol sitting at the edge of the long table, exuding an elusive confidence that both intimidated and inspired him. She was unlike anyone he had engaged with before. Armed with sharp insights and strategic foresight, her aura invited respect, yet demanded caution. "James," she greeted, her voice steady as her eyes scrutinized him. "Thanks for coming." "Thanks for having me," he replied, twisting his hands in front of him, a gesture he hoped didn't diminish the authority he wished to exude. Silence hung in the air like an uninvited guest. The moments stretched, allowing doubt to creep in.
What if he had made a mistake in reaching out? But as Carol leaned forward, poised to begin, something shifted within him. He had come too far to retreat into his comfort zone. The stakes were about much more than his personal ambitions. They resonated with the future of his daughters' lives. "I believe I want to learn," James declared, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "But I want to do it while staying true to my principles." Carol raised an eyebrow, intrigue flickering in her expression. "Integrity can be an asset, but it may also limit your reach. Let's explore whether there's a way to navigate both." This was it, his chance to understand the delicate balance between strategy and authenticity. They brainstormed fairly, navigating through his ideas, each suggestion becoming a branching path leading away from isolation and toward collaboration. Every point Carol made felt like a light illuminating the darkness of his previous hesitations. "Think of it this way," she explained. "An ally does not have to be a duplicity. Each connection made can serve a purpose, allowing you to promote the ideals you care about while still forming a coalition." James nodded slowly, a ripple of understanding influencing him profoundly. The tight grip he had over his rigid ideals began to loosen, replaced by curiosity. Was he ready to step into a realm where morality could coexist with calculated engagements? The fear of losing himself in the process began to recede as his newfound understanding grew. After 2 hours of rigorous discussion, ideas exchanged, and strategies cultivated, James left the meeting with a burst of energy. The day wasn't merely about gaining a new approach, it was about trailblazing a path for his daughters, tales yet unwritten, adventures waiting just beyond the horizon. But just as the elation swelled within him, an exhausting thought crept back into view. Had he compromised too much? The echo of his internal struggle resurfaced, the question lingering ominously until he could articulate it fully. Would he, in his pursuit of advantages, ultimately betray the principles he held so dear? As he pulled into his driveway, the weight of duality surged in him. He grasped the notion that tactics might craft a bridge toward his aspirations, yet the lingering query threatened to derail him. Was the battle for his daughter's future truly contingent on his ability to play the game and manipulate his way through? As he walked through the door, Emma and Lily greeted him, their innocent laughter igniting warmth in his heart. The juxtaposition of family bliss and his internal crisis set a heavy tone. They were his motivation, yet he feared that every decision he made might redefine what type of father he would be. He embraced them, but deep down he wrestled with the knowledge that tomorrow would require him to choose again, a choice that could make or break the foundation upon which his family's future stood. The moment of truth was approaching, and this time he had to ensure it wasn't just another gamble, but a calculated step towards securing their tomorrow. What if his upcoming decisions jeopardized everything he fought for? The balance of power tipped dangerously, as James wrestled with the realization. Could he manipulate the game without losing sight of his authenticity? James spent the evening in a haze, the echo of his meeting with Carol lingering in his thoughts. After tucking Emma and Lily into bed, he settled in front of the living room window, staring blankly at the streetlights illuminating the cul-de-sac. The world outside moved in its predictable rhythm, while inside him a tempest brewed. This was more than just about career advancement. It was about his identity as a father and a man. He pondered the strategies they developed. Each tactic felt like a stepping stone, bringing him closer to a vision. Yet a nagging sense of disquiet simmered beneath the surface. Could he truly maintain his integrity while navigating the cutthroat world of corporate maneuvering? As his mind raced through the implications, a realization hit him. To forge ahead without sacrificing his ideals, he would need to dig deeper and uncover strengths he had long ignored. The next morning, determined yet apprehensive, he decided to document his thoughts. In journals lying dormant for too long, he began scribbling about the principles that had defined him: honesty, perseverance, and love for his daughters. Writing became cathartic, revealing a clearer vision of what he wanted to express and protect. But it also forced him to confront the fact that he had built walls around these values, isolating himself, convinced that vulnerability equated to weakness. As the day wore on, the office buzzed with activity, and James found himself resisting the urge to retreat into his bubble. Instead, he sought out Carol to continue their conversation from the previous day. He entered her office, where each piece of art and desk arrangement spoke to confidence and order, qualities he yearned to embody. "James," she said, looking up from her work with a welcoming smile, "back for more insights?" "More like I'm hoping for a fresh perspective," he replied, surprising himself with how sincere he sounded. "I spent a lot of energy fearing a compromise, but I wonder if this pursuit is about more than just ideas. Maybe it's about finding common ground." Carol interlaced her fingers as she considered his words. "Common ground doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your core. It's about aligning your principles with your objectives. Let's dive deeper. Tell me about your ideals." She prompted him to share the values that defined him as a father and a professional. As he spoke, clarity emerged. These were not just abstract concepts, they were the bedrock of his character and ambitions. His commitment to his daughter's future intertwined with his drive for professional success in a way he had not fully appreciated before. But with each realization came afresh the weight of potential choices. Would active collaboration compromise the model of self-reliance he instilled in his daughters? What if the alliances he forged led them down a path where they became disillusioned with their own values? As his mind churned through these conflicts, he discovered another truth. His daughters needed to see their father evolve, not simply cling to an idealized past. Growth meant confronting discomfort, choosing progressively while holding fast to authenticity. He didn't need to abandon his values, merely enhance them through strategic partnerships. Leaving Carol's office, he felt invigorated, like a knight girding himself for battle. He needed to act decisively. He began forming a plan, putting into practice the blending of strategy with integrity that he had discussed. This wasn't merely a test of his professional resolve. It was a trial run for the kind of father he aspired to be, the kind who showed his daughters the importance of adaptation without losing oneself. However, that evening as he sat with Emma and Lily, they asked a question that snagged on his heart. "Dad, why are you always so serious now? You used to laugh more." The innocent inquiry sent a tremor through his core. Did they feel the weight he carried? He understood the stakes were higher than he had comprehended. His choices, his evolution, and his authenticity would shape them in profound ways. The path forward would demand more of him than academic strategies. It would require sincerity and a joyful spirit, elements he had allowed to fade amidst the noise of ambition. As he resolved to rekindle the lightness he had neglected, his phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. A message popped up from an unexpected source. Carol had forwarded a link about an upcoming networking event targeting key players in the industry. The call to action was unmistakable. Was this the moment to fully embrace change, or would attending it lead him further into territories he feared? With the weight of the decision pressing against his conscience, he realized this was another fork in his journey, a chance to act, engage, and retain integrity all at once. Would he seize the opportunity presented to him, or retreat into the shadows of indecision, unwilling to face the unknown? The next chapter of his journey was ready to unfold, and it would demand every ounce of his courage. James sat at his kitchen table, the link from Carol still glowing on his phone. The bright screen felt like a challenge, taunting him to step out of his comfort zone and face an uncertain future. He was no stranger to risk. Parenthood was a series of calculated gambles, But this ventured into professional territory that set him on edge. The clock's rhythmic ticking punctuated his thoughts, as doubts gnawed at his resolve. Networking events brought the possibility of opening doors, but they also drove in the fear of exposure. Would he truly represent the values he wrestled with so deeply, or would the corporate machine swallow him whole? He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Images of his daughters popped into his mind, their laughter echoing in the corners of the house. At that moment, he felt a surge of determination. They depended on him, for stability, for example. They needed a father who could not only provide materially, but also spiritually. With renewed heart, James opened his journal again and jotted down a list.
Under the heading, What the Networking Event Represents, he wrote, Opportunity, risk, growth, and the essence of who I want to be. Each word gave him a small adrenaline boost, setting his nerves alight. He kept envisioning the event, mapped out in his mind. Would it be the same suffocating arena filled with power suits and superficial exchanges? Or could it transform into a space where genuine connections might flourish, where authenticity played the starring role? Perhaps Carol's presence there would turn the tide in his favor, providing the buoyancy he desperately craved. Yet, with each fluctuation of bravado came the whisper of skepticism. After all, he had seen too many professionals around him jettison their values for a promotion or a nod of approval from authority figures. What if he too fell prey to that siren call? While he could envision the success, he feared its price, a slow erosion of the self he was striving to build. The following day, he resolved to meet Carol before the event. He needed the grounding presence of someone who had successfully maneuvered this landscape without compromising their core beliefs. At lunch, he found her in the bustling cafeteria engaged with 2 colleagues. When she noticed him, she excused herself and beckoned him over. "James, I'm glad you could make it. I was wondering if you'd decided to attend the event," she said, the joy in her expression underscoring their earlier discussions. "I'm considering it," he admitted, searching her eyes for an encouraging glimmer. "But it feels daunting. What if I'm just lost in there?" "Every great achievement feels daunting," she countered, meeting him with a firm gaze. "But remember, being authentic doesn't mean knowing all the right answers. It means staying true to your story. You're not entering a battlefield. You're there to share your perspective and to listen. Create connections based on your ideals, not just the surface glitz." At that moment, he felt like a deflated balloon being filled with air again. The conversation illuminated his path, revealing that vulnerability could indeed coexist with professionalism. Later, as he prepared for the event that evening, a sense of purpose settled in his chest. He put on a navy blazer to mark the occasion. It felt empowering and reminded him that he could approach all aspects of himself, fatherhood, career, integrity, with courage. As the event kicked off, James stepped into the crowded space, his heart racing with anticipation. The pulse of the crowd felt electric, a mix of excitement and the tension of genuine possibilities. He scanned the room, his resolve holding steady. He was here to make connections, yes, but also to demonstrate that one doesn't have to abandon who they are to navigate this world. He was ready to embody both father and professional. Just then, he spotted a familiar face at the far end of the room, a former colleague he had never quite gotten along with, someone whose ruthlessness had always overshadowed his capabilities. Their eyes locked for a moment, and an unspoken challenge hung in the air. James felt a jolt of uncertainty ripple through him. The time had come to face an adversary not only of his career, but of his own fears. Would he choose authenticity over confrontation, or would he back down into a space of self-doubt? As the music swelled around him, he took a deep breath, deciding to take the first step. The path ahead was woven with challenges, requiring his utmost courage, but he was determined to walk it, one purposeful stride at a time. What was about to unfold could either solidify his evolution or unravel the threads he was carefully weaving. With a pulse of anxiety coursing through him, he moved forward, ready to confront this pivotal moment head-on, for better or worse. Each interaction would serve as a test, not only of skills, but of the very values he had vowed to protect. James approached the figure down the crowded room, his heart quickening with each step. The weight of his former colleague's reputation loomed like a specter, both intimidating and intriguing. There was a time when James believed he could bend beneath that weight, reshaping himself to avoid confrontation. Yet tonight felt different. This was a confrontation, yes, but it was also a test of his own resolve. As he neared, he could see a smirk creeping across his colleague's face. The man, Derek, had always exuded a mix of contempt and confidence, often using his sharp tongue to belittle others. The unspoken rivalry deepened. It was not merely about professional ambitions, but also about the core of who each man had become over time. "James," Derek greeted, feigning pleasant surprise, "look who decided to join the big leagues. How quaint." James felt the ice run through his veins. Yet, beneath the chill lay a subtle warmth of courage building inside him. He took a breath, carefully choosing his words, determined to ground the interaction in his authentic self. "I'm here to network and explore new opportunities, Derek. I hope you're doing the same," he replied, keeping his tone measured. "Networking, huh? Or is it more like spying on those who actually belong?" Derek spat, his condescending smile widening. "What's a guy like you hoping to gain? Some scraps from the table?" The barb struck, but it did something unexpectedly invigorating. James felt a spark of defiance. He had spent too long letting this man's negativity dictate his feelings. There was a lesson in this moment, a revelation that perhaps his authentic journey was not just about embracing vulnerability, but also about reclaiming his power. "Actually," James said, maintaining eye contact, "I'm here to share my perspective. And whether you like it or not, I belong here just as much as you do. We all have something valuable to bring to the table." His voice remained steady, yet the conviction beneath it echoed louder than the crowded ambience surrounding them. Derek's expression faltered slightly, the surprise apparent. For the first time, the slightest hint of acknowledgement flickered across his features, a shift in power dynamics that James hadn't expected. This wasn't simply about professional growth anymore. It was about redefining the terms of his own self-worth. "Interesting," Derek mused, the irritation replaced by something darker. "Just remember, not everyone appreciates ambition when it's misplaced." James felt a surge of indignation, but he knew he had to navigate this moment carefully. He wasn't here to become another victim of Derek's sharp tongue, nor to engage in a blatant battle of egos. Instead, he sought to hold his ground while remaining true to the values he had written about. Using the tension as a springboard, he maneuvered the conversation toward shared interests, subtly shifting the focus away from competition and judgment. The inauthentic quips from Derek turned into more genuine exchanges about market trends and teamwork, revealing that beneath the hostility lay common ground they could discuss. As they spoke, James felt the familiar self-doubt ebbing away, replaced by a burgeoning confidence rooted in his commitment to authenticity. It wasn't just about how he was perceived, it was about who he chose to be in the face of opposition. The conversation took a turn, revealing unexpected insights. He realized that Derek's bravado was merely a facade masking deeper insecurities. As the evening progressed, James continued to mingle with others. The initial encounter with Derek transformed into a testament of his growth. He felt lighter, unshackled from the weight of past interactions that no longer defined him. Each conversation felt like adding brushstrokes to a canvas, depicting not just a professional narrative, but a more complicated portrait of personal evolution.
Just as he began to contemplate the evening's successes and the connections forged, a sudden commotion erupted at the entrance. Sensing an unexpected disturbance pulling at the attention in the room, James turned, a familiar tightness in his chest returning. Amid the chaos, someone called his name, with urgency. In that charged moment, uncertainty flooded back in, as he instinctively understood. This night was far from over, and not everything he faced would come from within. He needed to brace himself for whatever lay ahead, perhaps even the search for truths he had yet to uncover. What awaited him around the corner would challenge everything he had worked to achieve within himself. James stood frozen for a moment, grappling with the reality that the evening's trajectory had shifted yet again. As the noise intensified, he turned toward the entrance, heart racing, instinctively seeking familiarity among the shapes thrumming with energy.
"James!" A voice sliced through the fog, unmistakably Margaret's. Relief coursed through him as he rushed to her side, weaving through the crowd now abuzz with anticipation. "The kids! It's an emergency!" Her voice trembled, urgency gripping his very core. The world around him faded. Everything he had fought for, all the groundwork laid for Emma and Lily's future, flashed before his mind. "What happened?" he demanded, eyes wide with concern. "Their condition. We received a call about complications. They need you now." Exasperated, she took a breath, willing him to act. Time felt like it was slipping away, and an instinctual urge awakened within him. His daughters needed their father, and he must rise to this moment. Without hesitating, James focused on the nearest exit, his life's priorities pulling him forward. As the inky sky sprawled outside, he felt the weight of these escalating circumstances cascade upon him, pushing out the noise of the crowd. During the drive to the hospital, every red light felt like a cruel reminder of the time ticking away. He gripped the wheel with resolve, each passing moment sharpening his focus. "I can't lose them," he murmured to himself, a mantra against the rising tide of fear. Once inside the sterile hospital environment, the tension was palpable. Nurses and doctors moved briskly, and panic surged through him as he navigated the corridors. When he reached the twins' room, he inhaled deeply, steeling himself before stepping across the threshold. "James," a doctor greeted him, but the shadow of uncertainty loomed over their exchange. "We've detected a secondary issue. The treatment has become more complex, and their situation is precarious." The words reverberated through him. All he could picture was their laughter, the innocence of childhood that suddenly felt under siege. This moment, he understood, demanded everything he had cultivated in himself: the love, the resilience, the determination. "Do what you must, just save my girls," he insisted, voice firm. The words settled into the atmosphere surrounding him, a promise he would uphold. As the doctors left to implement a plan, Margaret turned to him, looking anxious yet determined. "They'll do everything possible. You need to stay strong for Emma and Lily." His heart raced, but clarity emerged alongside the fear. Through this experience, he made a decision not just to endure, but to thrive in his role as a father. By acting upon this clarity, James leaned forward, embodying the fierce protector he yearned to be amidst chaos. Minutes turned into hours, but he held on, whispering reassurances and reading to them from the old family scrapbook he had discovered, stories of love and strength garnishing their family lineage. As the narrative unfolded, something remarkable began to happen. Emma and Lily's eyelids fluttered open. "You're going to be okay. I'm here," he murmured, holding their tiny hands.
Their grip tightened, and in that moment he felt an overwhelming surge of purpose wash over him. With each passing moment during their recovery, James realized he was changing, not defined by anger or negligence, but emerging forged anew through the crisis. The hospital room shifted from a space of vulnerability to one of profound resilience. As they battled through discomfort, James became an anchor to which his daughters could cling, demonstrating the values he had spent a lifetime cultivating. Suddenly, he was aware of the strength gained through vulnerability and connection, the truest form of authenticity. Days later, with the situation stabilizing, they were finally discharged. As they stepped into the early morning sunlight, Emma and Lily held each other's hands while James captured the moment in his heart. From that day forward, changes began to prioritize value over job title. He fostered connections not just to gain opportunities, but to nurture relationships that resonated with his core beliefs. He attended more gatherings, exchanging ideas with community leaders, leveraging every experience to build an ecosystem for his daughters, a network centered on integrity and authenticity. Looking back, the child he had once been, the man wrestling with loss, had transformed. He was not merely fighting to reclaim a past, but forging a future with awareness, grounding, and clarity. With solid confidence, he returned to the town hall one last time, this time as a formidable advocate, no longer shadowed by grief or doubt. This meeting was not just for the estate, but for a community he was ready to embrace. Embracing these metamorphoses, he recognized this was the threshold of a new legacy, where his daughters would thrive. The battle he had fought through personal and professional conflicts had reshaped him into a man of purpose, seen now with respect and regard. James knew without doubt the real victory lay not just within the walls of Maplewood, but within each deliberate choice he made in the name of love. He breathed in deeply, feeling gratitude for all that had come before, the trials, the triumphs, the love that had ultimately transformed him into the man he had become. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories highlighting personal growth and fulfillment. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and share this transformative journey with others, eager for tales of overcoming adversity. Comment your reactions and theories about this culmination. Your words matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspirational conclusion, unlocking their journeys of resilience and authenticity.